All right, in chapter 12, we are going to be talking about forests. So this first lesson is just kind of a background about forests. So a forest by definition is any ecosystem with a high density of trees. And so forests provide us with lots of things like habitats for organisms. They help maintain the quality of the soil, of the air and the water, and they play key roles in our planet's biogeochemical cycles. That was the phosphorus, nitrogen, carbon, and water cycles. And so they give us fuel. They give us wood, which is used for fuel, construction, paper production, and more. So there's a lot, and we'll talk more about that. But the majority of the Earth's forests are boreal forests, if you remember back to our biomes. And so the forest biomes include boreal forest, tropical rainforest, temperate deciduous rainforest, temperate rainforests, and tropical dry forests. And so the majority of those, like I said, are the boreal forests. There's a bunch of different pictures here. This is a Maple Beech birch forest in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, so found in Michigan. An oak hickory forest in West Virginia. And then we have a ponderosa pine forest in northern Arizona, and right here is a redwood forest, which is found in coastal northern California. So they group them by tree types. And within each forest biome, there's differences in soil and climate that will alter the community. So all of the living things all of the different types of living things that live there are the community. So what is available in the soil and how much rainfall there is and the temperatures and things like that are what affect the biome. So we classify forests into different forest types based on their predominant tree species. So the majority of the type of trees that live there is how we'll classify them. So for example, we call the redwood forests the redwood forests because they're dominated by redwood trees. And altogether, there are forests that cover 31% of the Earth's land surface, and they're found on every continent except for Antarctica. So forests are ecologically complex. And so remember that when we talked about different types of ecosystems and diversity, a big one of them is structural diversity, and that allows for a lot more biodiversity, a lot of different types of life. And so forests are super structurally complex. And so they are some of the richest ecosystems for biodiversity because their leaves, fruits, and seeds of trees, shrubs, and forest floor plants furnish food and shelter for an immense diversity of insects, birds, mammals, and other animals. So they just provide a ton of food. So it's not only are they structurally diverse, but they allow there's a lot of food there. There's a lot of primary productivity. And then also there's a lot of fungi and microbes that live in both parasitic and mutualistic relationships with the plants. So the structural diversity of a forest is broken up into different layers. So the canopy is the top layer of leaves and branches in the treetops. And so there's a lot of beetles, caterpillars, and other leaf-eating insects that are found there. And those provide food for the birds that live in the upper. Birds eat a lot of insects, so all the different leaves provide food for insects, and then the birds eat the insects. And then mammals might live up there and also eat other types of fruit and leaves from the canopy. Then beneath the canopy is the subcanopy, which is the middle portion of the forest, found beneath the tree crowns of the canopy. And then we have the understory, which is the lower layer consisting of shrubs and small trees, and then the forest floor. So animals live in all of them. They're going to eat the fruit and the leaves of the upper layers, and then they'll eat bark, branches, and trunks of trees, or the smaller other plants like vines, lichens, and mosses that grow on the trees. So if we find dead and dying trees, that's what's called a snag. So this is a snag right here. And that provides homes for insects, which would then in turn provide food sources for birds. So for example, insects would break down the dead tree wood, and then the dead tree wood becomes food for woodpeckers. The woodpeckers peck holes in the wood, and now there's cavities in the wood for animals to live in. So cavities in any plant are going to provide places for nests and shelter, so for animals to live in and for birds to lay their eggs in and things like that. So not only are there a lot of different branches on which animals can live and eat, but then there's going to be holes in the trees and things like that. So then any fallen trees will create openings called tree fall gaps. So here there's a fallen log, so there used to be a tree here and it fell. What this does is it provides another level of structural diversity, because now most of the time the sunlight is coming from the top here, right? And this isn't two-dimensional, it would come both this way and this way. So the tops of these plants, the canopy is getting all the sunlight. If there's a tree fall gap for any reason, now the sunlight is shining down, so it increases the primary production of down here and will push succession through. So they'll allow for earlier plants earlier in succession to grow here and to grow back, basically. And then we come down to the forest floor, which is where we find the majority of the biodiversity in a forest, because decaying logs, fallen leaves, and branches would nourish the soil, and lots of soil organisms decompose plant material and cycle nutrients. So there's just a lot of plants and animals and decomposers living on the forest floor. So that's where most of the biodiversity is. Additionally, in tropical rainforests, a lot of times we'll see specific plants sticking out above the canopy layer, and that allows for what are called epiphytes. And epiphytes are plants that live on other plants. So say there's a really tall tree, maybe this is the tallest tree here, there might be some vines or mosses or lichens that are living on that really tall tree because it's advantageous for them, they're getting the most sunlight, and so that's creating an additional layer of biodiversity and structural diversity for living things. So the forests just are super structurally diverse. And as plant diversity increases, so does overall diversity, and so the more different types of plants there are in a forest, the more overall diversity there would be. So as forests move through succession, so remember succession is how an ecosystem returns after a disturbance, starting from either nothing or just having soil. As forests move through succession, their species composition changes along with the structure, so early succession looks different than late succession. And old growth forests, so forests that are very late in the game of succession, they've been around for a long, long time, they have much more diversity than young forests because they have more structural diversity, more microhabitats. If you think about a snag or a cavity in a snag as its own habitat, you're not going to have that in newer trees because this needs older trees to be dying for that to happen. And resources. So there's just more available in an old growth forest. However, old growth forests are home to a lot of endangered or threatened species because there are much fewer old growth forests these days because we've been cutting them down. So younger forests are more common than old growth forests at this point. All right, so we're talking about ecosystem services. So forests do so much for us as an ecosystem. So remember, the ecosystem services are things that an ecosystem provides to us for free. So one of them is that tree roots provide stabilization in the soil and reduce erosion. So I think that I'm covering this, but one of these things it says right here is that we stabilize soil and prevent erosion. So if there's tree roots there, the soil can't just run away as water or wind comes. So we're preventing erosion. These tree roots also recycle nutrients as things are dying. They are being decomposed and their nutrients are returning to the soil. So they cycle nutrients. They also transport minerals to the soil surface. So maybe there's some minerals all the way down here like calcium or iron found deep in the soil. The roots are removing it to the soil surface as they suck up water. So that's good. They are that's an ecosystem service, getting those nutrients to the top. The leaves and leaf litter, this is not on here, but leaves and leaf litter, slow runoff. So remember that runoff is when it rains where the water goes. So they are intercepting the water. And so basically that really helps an ecosystem. It prevents erosion, it prevents flooding, it helps water soak into the ground. So if you're on a hill, water's going to run right down and none of that water is going to absorb into the soil, so the plants aren't able to use it. But if there's more leaf litter around, it will get stuck and it's more likely that it will soak into the ground. It reduces erosion, I already said that, and it helps keep our waterways clean because remember that runoff can take a lot of pollution and trash and things like that into our waterways. So if the water stays where it is, it's not taking things down there. It would also prevent eutrophication. Also, forest plants. So in addition to those sorts of things, the plants are filtering pollution as they do photosynthesis. They're taking in carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen. So they are cleaning the air. They're storing carbon. They purify water as they take up water through transpiration. So as they take up water from the soil, then they are cleaning it as it moves through them until they leaves through through the tops of their plants through transpiration. They cycle carbon dioxide and water. And because of that, forests are viewed as a vital safeguard against global climate change. So the more forests we have, they're able to remove carbon dioxide, remove those greenhouse gases from the atmosphere and slow climate change. They also provide cultural, aesthetic, and recreation values to people. So that's why there's so many people who like to go hiking and camping, and there's that whole biophilia aspect of it, that they really provide something intangible in addition to all the things they do provide to us, all the resources and all the ecosystem services. There is something else that allow us to have a special connection and a special value over the forests. Oh, I'm not done. Sorry. Oh, so they also provide us with valuable resources. I was talking about this. So forests also contain plants that we use for medicines, dyes, animals, plants, and fungi for food, and wood from trees themselves. So basically, your book goes into this big long list of the different things that just plants have allowed for us to do. They've given us fire to cook food and keep us warm. They've let us build homes that give us shelter. They've allowed us to build ships that have carried people and cultures between continents. And they gave us paper, which allowed us to have the first non-industrial information revolution. If we didn't have that, if we didn't have wood, our culture would look, our society, our race would look a lot different than it does now. And industrial harvesting has increased our ability to extract timber, so meaning that we now have more technology that allows us to get wood more easily, with most of it coming from countries with boreal forests like Canada, Russia, or rainforests such as Brazil or Indonesia.